Hey, welcome back to the show, and a big thank you for tuning in once again.
As always, we've got a glossary waiting for you in the description, so if any word catches you off guard, it's right there.
All right, let's dive in.
Jake, I have a confession to make. Last week, I used an AI tool to help me draft a report at work, and it finished in about 20 minutes, something that would normally take me 2 hours. And my first reaction was not, great, I saved time. It was, wait, does this mean someone could replace me with this?
That is such an honest reaction, and I think it captures exactly the anxiety that millions of people are feeling right now about AI and the future of their jobs. You had a genuinely useful experience, and your first instinct was still a little bit of existential dread.
Exactly, which is why I want to talk about this today in a realistic way. Not the extreme version where robots take every job and we all sit at home doing nothing, and not the overly optimistic version where AI just creates wonderful new opportunities for everyone. The honest, complicated, somewhere in the middle version.
I think that is exactly the right framing, because this conversation has a tendency to go to the extremes very quickly, and neither extreme is particularly useful. The reality, as with most big technological shifts, is much more nuanced.
So let's start with what we actually know. Is AI already taking jobs, or is that still a future concern?
It is already happening, and it has been for longer than most people realize. Automation has been displacing certain types of work for decades. Factory assembly lines, data entry, basic customer service calls. What is different now is the speed, the scale, and crucially, the types of jobs being affected. AI is no longer just automating manual or repetitive tasks. It is starting to affect knowledge work, writing, coding, legal research, financial analysis, design.
Which is a significant shift, because knowledge workers have historically felt relatively protected. The assumption was always, as long as you have skills that require intelligence, creativity, and judgment, you are safe. And now that assumption is being challenged.
Challenged, yes, but I do not think demolished, at least not yet, and maybe not ever entirely, which is where the conversation gets really interesting.
I want to bring in the historical perspective here, because I think it is genuinely helpful, even if it is not a perfect guide. Every major wave of technological change in history has triggered exactly the same fear, that the new technology will destroy jobs permanently and leave workers with nothing. The Luddites in 19th century England smashed textile machinery because they believed it would eliminate their livelihoods.
And in the short term, they were right. The technology did destroy many of those specific jobs. But over the longer term, industrialization created far more jobs than it eliminated. The economy expanded, new industries emerged, and employment levels eventually recovered and grew.
Right. The same pattern repeated with the mechanization of agriculture, with computers replacing clerical workers, with ATMs replacing bank tellers. Each time, the prediction of mass permanent unemployment did not materialize. New roles emerged that nobody had anticipated.
But I want to push back on the automatic optimism that comes from that historical pattern, because there are economists who argue that this time genuinely is different for 2 reasons. First, the pace of change is much faster than previous technological revolutions. In the past, transitions happened over generations, giving societies time to adapt. AI is moving over years, not decades.
That is a serious point. Structural adjustment takes time, and if the technology outpaces the education system and the retraining infrastructure, you get a very painful gap where large numbers of people are displaced before the new opportunities have fully materialized.
And the second reason is breadth. Previous waves of automation targeted specific sectors. The Industrial Revolution mechanized physical labor. Computers automated clerical work. But AI is cutting across almost every sector simultaneously. Healthcare, law, finance, creative industries, education, logistics. When the disruption is that broad, the idea that workers can simply retrain into the new jobs becomes harder to sustain.
Because if AI is also affecting those new jobs, where do you retrain to?
Exactly. It is a genuinely difficult question, and I do not think anyone has a fully convincing answer yet.
Let's get practical for a moment, because I think a lot of people listening to this are genuinely wondering, is my job at risk? What does the research actually say?
The general finding is that jobs involving highly repetitive, rule-based tasks are most vulnerable. Things like data processing, basic accounting, paralegal research, content moderation, customer service scripts, and certain types of coding. These are roles where the output is relatively predictable and the process can be described in clear steps.
And what about jobs that seem more protected?
The roles that consistently come out as harder to automate are those requiring genuine human connection, complex physical dexterity, real-world unpredictability, and deep contextual judgment. So skilled tradespeople, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, are actually in quite a strong position because their work requires physical problem-solving in unpredictable environments that robots still struggle with enormously.
Which is somewhat ironic, given that for decades people were told that manual trades were less secure than office jobs. It turns out that being able to fix a boiler in someone's kitchen is a pretty resilient skill.
Ha, yes. And similarly, roles requiring deep human empathy and interpersonal trust, therapists, nurses, social workers, teachers, are also considered relatively resilient because the human relationship is itself the product. People do not just want good advice, they want to feel heard and understood by another person.
Though even those roles are not entirely immune, AI is already being used as a tool in mental health support, in medical diagnosis, in personalized learning. The question is whether it replaces the human or augments them.
And I think augment versus replace is probably the most useful distinction in this whole conversation. For most roles, the realistic near-term scenario is not full replacement, but significant transformation. The job changes, certain tasks disappear, new ones emerge, and the human's value shifts towards the things AI still cannot do well.
Which means the most important skill right now might not be any specific technical knowledge, but rather the ability to adapt, to learn continuously, and to work effectively alongside AI tools rather than in competition with them.
So if adaptability is the meta skill of the moment, what does that actually look like in practice? What should someone do right now if they want to future-proof themselves, as much as that is even possible?
I think there are a few things that come up consistently in the research and in conversations with people who hire. The first is what you might call AI literacy, not necessarily being able to build AI systems, but understanding broadly how they work, what they are good at, what they are not good at, and how to use them effectively as tools. That is becoming a baseline expectation across a huge range of industries.
Which is good news for people who engage with it proactively rather than avoiding it out of fear. The people who are going to struggle most are probably not the ones whose jobs are replaced, but the ones who refuse to engage with AI tools at all and fall behind colleagues who are using them to do the same work twice as fast.
The second thing is what I would loosely call deeply human skills. Critical thinking, complex communication, empathy, ethical reasoning, creativity that is genuinely original rather than recombinative. These are things AI can simulate to a degree, but cannot truly replicate, and they are the areas where humans still have a meaningful edge.
There is a slightly uncomfortable irony there, though. The education systems in most countries have spent decades moving away from the humanities, philosophy, literature, history, ethics, in favor of STEM subjects, on the grounds that technical skills are what the economy needs. And now it turns out that the soft skills those humanities disciplines develop might be exactly what is hardest to automate.
Philosophers and historians might have the last laugh after all.
Do not tell them that. They will be insufferable. But there is a serious point underneath the joke. The value of learning how to think rigorously, argue clearly, and engage with ambiguity is probably not going down in an AI-heavy economy. It is going up.
And the third skill is probably the most uncomfortable to name because it is not really a skill you can learn in a course. It is genuine resilience and comfort with uncertainty. The people who would navigate this transition best are those who can tolerate not knowing exactly what the next 5 years will look like, stay curious, and keep reinventing themselves without falling apart.
Which, to be fair, is easier said than done, especially for people who are not in a position of financial security or have limited access to education and retraining. Which brings me to something I think we have to address directly. I want to talk about something that I think is really important and gets overlooked in most discussions about AI and jobs, which is the question of responsibility. If AI displaces significant numbers of workers, who is responsible for managing that transition?
Most people's instinct is to say the individual. Retrain yourself, update your skills, stay adaptable. An individual effort absolutely matters. But I think placing all the responsibility on individual workers is both unfair and insufficient.
Unfair because the disruption is being driven by decisions made by large corporations and enabled by government policy, not by individual workers. A 50-year-old factory worker whose job disappears due to automation did not cause that disruption. Telling them it is entirely their personal responsibility to navigate it is a bit like blaming someone for their house flooding when there was no flood protection infrastructure.
And insufficient because the scale of what may be coming requires a response at the level of governments and institutions, not just individuals. We are potentially talking about the need for massive investment in education and retraining systems, stronger social safety nets, and possibly even rethinking fundamental ideas like how work is defined, valued, and rewarded in society.
Some economists have revived the idea of universal basic income, a regular payment from the government to every citizen, regardless of employment status, as part of the answer. The logic being that if AI generates enormous productivity and wealth, some of that needs to be redistributed to the people whose labor it is replacing.
It is a genuinely interesting idea, and we will probably do a whole episode on it at some point. But the core point is that the transition to an AI-heavy economy is a collective challenge, not just a personal one. And the societies that navigate it best will be those that treat it as such.
And perhaps the first step is having honest, informed conversations about it, rather than oscillating between panic and blind optimism, which is, I suppose, what we are trying to do today.
I think so. And at the very least, being informed about what is happening puts you in a better position to make good decisions about your career, about what you study, about how you vote.
Knowledge as the first line of defense. I like that.
And one more thing I want to say before we wrap up. I think it is easy to talk about all of this in a very abstract, macroeconomic way and forget that behind every statistic about job displacement, there is a real person, someone who has built their identity and their sense of purpose around a particular kind of work, and who faces the prospect of that being taken away. That human dimension matters, and it should not get lost in the policy debate.
That is such an important reminder. Economic transitions are not just numbers. They are people's lives, their self-worth, their communities. And the way society responds to that human cost, with support and dignity, or with indifference, says a great deal about the kind of society it is.
Well said. Right. Let's hear from our listeners. Okay, and now we want to hear from you. This is a topic where your perspective genuinely matters because you are living through this transition right now.
Question 1. Do you feel worried about AI and the future of your job or career, or are you more optimistic? Have you already noticed AI changing the way you work? Tell us in the comments in English.
And question 2, which we ask every single episode. What topics do you want us to cover next? Technology, health, relationships, money, culture, travel? Anything goes. Drop your suggestions below. We read every comment, and your ideas directly shape future episodes.
Writing your answer in English is brilliant practice at this level. Even 3 or 4 sentences is great. And if this episode got you thinking, share it with someone who might find it useful. See you next time.
Thanks so much for listening. Genuinely glad you joined us today.
The glossary is in the description with all the key vocabulary from today's episode. See you next time.
Take care.
Bye.